The champagne fountain had barely stopped flowing when Juliette Jensen watched her father shake hands with the man whose family had spent 3 generations trying to destroy theirs. She stood frozen in the corner of the grand ballroom, her emerald dress suddenly feeling too tight, her heart hammering against her ribs as Harold Jensen smiled at Marcus Fitzgerald like they were old friends instead of bitter enemies. The truce announcement echoed in her ears, but all she could think about was how her grandfather had lost everything because of the Fitzgerald dynasty's ruthless real estate empire. How her father had spent 20 years clawing back their reputation in the hotel industry. How every family dinner ended with warnings about those people, the Fitzgeralds, who would stop at nothing to crush competition. Quite the spectacle, isn't it? A voice beside her made Juliette turn. The man standing there was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell just slightly over his forehead and eyes that seemed to see right through her careful composure. He wore a tailored navy suit that fit him perfectly, and there was something about the way he held himself that spoke of confidence without arrogance. "I'm sorry," Juliette managed, taking a sip of her wine to steady herself. "The performance up there." He nodded toward the stage where their fathers stood. 2 families who have hated each other for decades suddenly playing nice. Makes you wonder what's really going on. Juliette studied him carefully. He didn't look familiar, which meant he probably wasn't part of the inner circles of either family. Maybe they're tired of fighting. Maybe peace is actually possible. You believe that? His lips curved into a slight smile, genuine rather than mocking. You must be an optimist. Or maybe I just think life's too short to hold onto ancient grudges. She surprised herself with the honesty. "I'm Juliette. Fletcher." He extended his hand, and when she shook it, his grip was warm and firm. "And I think you might be the only reasonable person in this room." They spent the next hour talking, tucked away in their corner while the party swirled around them. Fletcher was easy to talk to, with a dry sense of humor that made her laugh despite the tension of the evening. He worked in commercial development, he told her, which explained his interest in the Jensen-Fitzgerald truce. But he seemed more interested in her thoughts on architecture, her passion for sustainable hotel design, the volunteer work she did with housing initiatives for displaced families. "Most people at these things only want to talk about money or connections," Fletcher said as they stepped onto the balcony for fresh air. The city sparkled below them, Chicago's skyline a glittering testament to ambition and dreams. "You actually care about making a difference. Money and connections don't mean much if you're not doing something worthwhile with them." Juliette leaned against the railing, aware of how close he was standing. "My family has this legacy, this whole history of building luxury hotels. And that's fine, but I keep thinking about all the people who will never be able to afford a night in one of our properties. Shouldn't we be using our resources to help?" Fletcher looked at her with something like wonder. "You're remarkable. You know that." Heat crept up her neck. "I'm just being practical." "No." He turned to face her fully. "You're being human. It's rarer than you'd think, especially in our world." Before she could ask what he meant by that, someone called her name. Her older brother Thomas appeared in the doorway, his expression tight. "Dad wants you inside. Important people to meet." Juliette felt Fletcher's presence beside her like a magnetic pull as she reluctantly moved toward the door. "Will you be here later?" she asked, surprising herself again. "I'll find you," Fletcher promised, and something in his voice made her believe him. The next hour was a blur of handshakes and forced smiles as her father paraded her around like a prized possession. Harold Jensen had built his empire back from ashes, and now he was determined to show the world that the Jensen family was stronger than ever. Juliette played her part, charming investors and business partners, but her mind kept drifting to the man on the balcony. It was nearly midnight when she finally escaped back outside. Fletcher was there, as if he'd been waiting, and the smile he gave her made her stomach flutter. "Want to get out of here?" he asked. Juliette knew she should say no. She had responsibilities, appearances to maintain. But something about this man made her want to be reckless. Yes. They slipped out through a service exit, laughing like teenagers as they hit the street. Fletcher hailed a cab and gave the driver an address Juliette didn't recognize. 20 minutes later, they were standing in front of a small diner that looked like it had been there since the 50s. "Best pie in Chicago," Fletcher announced, holding the door open for her. "And I will fight anyone who disagrees." The place was nearly empty, just a few night shift workers grabbing coffee. They slid into a booth, and Fletcher ordered 2 slices of apple pie and coffee without asking what she wanted. Normally, that would annoy her, but somehow it felt right, like he just knew. "So tell me," Fletcher said as the waitress brought their order, "how does someone like you end up at a party like that? You don't seem like you belong in that world." "Because I don't want to spend my life schmoozing and talking about profit margins." Juliette took a bite of pie and had to admit it was incredible. "My father would say I'm too soft for business. My brothers think I'm naive, but I just believe there has to be more to life than accumulating wealth." Fletcher's expression grew serious. "What if you're trapped in a situation where your family expects certain things from you? Where walking away means betraying everyone you love? Then you find a way to be true to yourself while honoring what matters to them." Juliette met his eyes. "Or you make the hard choice and deal with the consequences." "Have you ever had to make that kind of choice?" She thought about it. "Not yet, but I think it's coming. My father wants me to take over operations at our new property downtown. It's a huge responsibility, and it's what he's been grooming me for. But I keep thinking about using that space for something different. Mixed-income housing, maybe. Ground-floor commercial with affordable apartments above. Actually serving the community instead of just the wealthy elite." "He'd go for that?" "Probably not." Juliette smiled sadly. "Which is why I haven't told him yet." They talked until the diner closed at 2 in the morning, and then Fletcher walked her to where his car was parked several blocks away. It was a modest sedan, not the luxury vehicle she'd expected from someone at that party. "Can I see you again?" he asked as they stood beside the car. The streetlight cast shadows across his face, making him look mysterious and familiar all at once. "I'd like that," Juliette said softly. He drove her home, and when he kissed her cheek goodbye outside her apartment building, she felt electricity run through her entire body. Over the next 2 weeks, Juliette saw Fletcher whenever she could steal time away from family obligations. They met at coffee shops and walked through parks, talking about everything and nothing. He was careful never to pry too deeply into her family business, and she appreciated that. With Fletcher, she could just be Juliette, not Harold Jensen's daughter, not the hotel heiress with a legacy to uphold. "I think I'm falling for you," Fletcher admitted one evening as they sat by the lake, watching the sunset paint the water gold and pink. "That probably sounds crazy. We barely know each other." Juliette's heart raced. "It doesn't sound crazy, I feel it too." He pulled her close, and when he kissed her properly for the first time, it felt like coming home. But reality had a way of crashing in. The morning after that perfect kiss, Juliette walked into her father's office for their weekly meeting and found him in a rage. Thomas stood by the window, his jaw clenched, while their younger brother Patrick paced back and forth. "What's wrong?" Juliette asked, alarm creeping through her. "The Fitzgeralds," her father spat. "This whole truce was a setup. They've been quietly buying up properties around our new development, boxing us in. Marcus Fitzgerald's son is behind it. Fletcher Fitzgerald, some kind of golden boy genius who's been masterminding their expansion for the past 5 years. The room tilted. Juliette gripped the back of a chair to steady herself. Fletcher Fitzgerald, you know him. Thomas's eyes narrowed. Her throat was too tight. We met at the party, I didn't know. He never said his last name was Fitzgerald. Her father's face went pale, then red. What do you mean you met him? Juliette, tell me you haven't been seeing that man. But she couldn't lie, not when her whole world was crumbling. I've been seeing someone named Fletcher. He told me he worked in commercial development. I had no idea. Jesus Christ. Patrick stopped pacing. Jules, please tell me you didn't share any information about our projects. Of course not. Anger flared through her shock. I'm not an idiot, and he never asked. We just talked about normal things. Life, goals, dreams. But even as she said it, doubt crept in. Had he been playing her all along? Using her feelings against her, her father sank into his chair, suddenly looking older than his 58 years. This is bad, Juliette. This is very bad. If the board finds out a Fitzgerald has been spending time with you, getting close to you, they'll think we've been compromised. I didn't know, she repeated, her voice breaking. I swear I didn't know who he was. Thomas moved to her side, his anger softening to concern. We believe you, but you need to cut contact immediately. Block his number, don't see him again. This family cannot afford another betrayal by the Fitzgeralds. Juliette nodded numbly, but inside she was screaming. Because even knowing who Fletcher was, even understanding the impossibility of the situation, her heart still raced when she thought about him. And that made her either the biggest fool in Chicago or someone who had found something worth fighting for. She left her father's office and went straight home, ignoring the 3 calls from Fletcher that came through on the drive. In her apartment, she finally let herself fall apart, crying until her eyes were swollen and her throat was raw. Her phone buzzed with a text. Fletcher. Where are you? I miss you. With shaking hands, she typed back. I know who you are, Fletcher Fitzgerald. How could you lie to me? The response came immediately. Can we talk, please? I can explain. There's nothing to explain. We're done. Her phone rang. She let it go to voicemail. It rang again and again. Finally, she answered, if only to tell him to leave her alone. Juliette, please listen to me. Fletcher's voice was urgent, almost desperate. Yes, I'm a Fitzgerald, but I didn't lie to you. I just didn't use my last name because I wanted to meet you as myself, not as part of this stupid family drama. You knew who I was, she said flatly. From the beginning. A pause. Yes. I saw you at the party, and I knew you were Harold Jensen's daughter. But Jules, I swear I wasn't trying to manipulate you or get information. I just wanted to know you. The woman who cares about affordable housing and sustainable design. The woman who makes me laugh and challenges me to be better. And the property deals, boxing my family in, that's business, that's separate. He sounded frustrated now. I've been working on that development for 2 years, long before I met you. It has nothing to do with us. There is no us. Juliette's voice rose. There can't be. Our families are enemies, Fletcher. My grandfather lost everything because of yours. My father has spent his entire adult life fighting against the Fitzgerald empire. How can you possibly think this could work? Because I love you. The words hung in the air between them. I know it's fast and I know it sounds insane, but I love you, Juliette. And I think you love me too. Doesn't that matter more than some ancient family grudge? Tears streamed down her face. It should. God, it should, but it doesn't. I can't betray my family like this. I can't be with you. So that's it. You're just going to walk away from what we have because of our last names. I don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice, Juliette. You're the one who told me that. You find a way to be true to yourself while honoring what matters. Remember. I remember. Her voice was barely a whisper. But I also remember that sometimes the right choice is the one that breaks your heart. Goodbye, Fletcher. She hung up before he could respond and blocked his number through a haze of tears. The next few weeks were torture. Juliette threw herself into work, spending 16-hour days at the new property downtown, trying to lose herself in construction schedules and design meetings. Her father seemed satisfied that she'd cut ties with Fletcher, and gradually the family tension eased. Thomas stopped watching her like she might explode, and Patrick even joked with her again over dinner. But at night, alone in her apartment, she ached for Fletcher. She missed his laugh, his insight, the way he made her feel seen and understood. She missed the future they'd started to imagine together, walks by the lake and quiet dinners and building something meaningful. She'd done the right thing. She knew she'd done the right thing. So why did it feel like she'd made the worst mistake of her life? One afternoon, Juliette was reviewing accessibility plans for the new building when her assistant knocked on the trailer door. "Someone here to see you. He says it's important." She looked up to find a man in his 60s, silver-haired and distinguished, standing in the doorway. Something about his features was familiar, the shape of his jaw, the color of his eyes. "Miss Jensen." He extended his hand. "I'm Marcus Fitzgerald. I believe you've been seeing my son." Juliette's blood ran cold. "That's over. I ended it." "I know. Fletcher told me." Marcus gestured to the chair across from her desk. "May I?" She wanted to refuse, to tell him to leave, but curiosity won out. "Fine." Marcus sat, looking around the trailer at the plans and models scattered everywhere. "You're working on mixed-use development, I see. Ground floor commercial, affordable housing above. It's good work." "What do you want, Mr. Fitzgerald?" He met her eyes, and she saw Fletcher in them, that same intensity and honesty. "I want to explain some things, about your grandfather and mine. About this feud that's been ruining lives for 3 generations. I know the history. Your family destroyed mine. That's one version." Marcus pulled a folder from his briefcase. "This is another." Over the next hour, he walked her through documents she'd never seen. Emails, contracts, letters. The picture they painted was different from what she'd been told her whole life. Yes, the Fitzgeralds had outbid the Jensens on a critical property deal 60 years ago. But her grandfather had been planning to bulldoze a historic neighborhood to build a hotel. Marcus's grandfather had instead preserved the buildings and created affordable housing. "Your grandfather was furious," Marcus explained. "He felt betrayed because my grandfather had been his partner, but Robert Fitzgerald couldn't stand by and watch those families be displaced. He made a choice between business and conscience." Juliette's head spun. "My father never told me this." "Because Harold doesn't know. Your grandfather was so consumed with anger and shame that he rewrote the story, made himself the victim and us the villains. And we let him because fighting back would only have hurt more people." Marcus leaned forward. "But I'm tired, Miss Jensen. I'm tired of this hatred poisoning everything. And I'm tired of watching my son, who I've never seen this happy, suffer because of something that happened before he was born." "What are you asking me to do?" "I'm asking you to consider that maybe there's another way. Fletcher tells me you want to use this property for something more than just another luxury development. What if we worked together, combined our resources to actually make a difference in this city?" "My father would never agree to that." "Then maybe it's time someone in this story made a different choice." Marcus stood. "Think about it. Fletcher's at 847-555-0142 if you change your mind about blocking him." After he left, Juliette sat in the trailer for a long time, staring at the documents he'd left behind. Everything she'd believed about her family history was shifting, reforming into a new shape. Her grandfather hadn't been a tragic victim. He'd been a man who prioritized profit over people, and when he'd faced consequences, he'd turned bitter. But even knowing that, even questioning the foundation of the feud, Could she really betray her father? Harold Jensen had built his entire identity around reclaiming the family honor. If she sided with the Fitzgeralds, it would destroy him, unless she could show him another path. That night, Juliette called a family meeting. Her father, both brothers, and her mother, Patricia, gathered in the Jensen family home, the Tudor mansion where Juliette had grown up. "I've learned some things about grandfather," she began without preamble. "About what really happened with the Fitzgeralds." Harold's face darkened. "Juliette, we've been over this." "No, Dad, you've told me your version, but I've seen documents now. Letters. The truth is more complicated than you made it seem." She laid out what Marcus had shown her, watching her father's expression shift from anger to confusion to something that might have been pain. "Even if this is true," he said finally, "it doesn't change anything. The Fitzgeralds have spent decades trying to crush us." "Have they?" Thomas spoke up unexpectedly. "Because I've been looking into it. Most of the deals we thought were attacks were just normal business competition. We've been operating from a defensive position for so long that we saw enemies everywhere." Patrick nodded. "And it's cost us. We could have expanded into 3 more cities by now if we weren't so focused on fighting the Fitzgeralds." Patricia, who rarely spoke at these meetings, put her hand over Harold's. "Maybe it's time to let it go, darling. Our father was a complicated man. You know that. He had his demons." Harold looked at each of them, and Juliette saw him truly struggling with it. The foundation of his worldview was cracking. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A partnership." Juliette pulled out her tablet, showing them the designs she'd been working on for weeks, the ones she'd developed with Marcus's input. The property downtown could become something revolutionary. Jensen design and hospitality expertise combined with Fitzgerald resources and community connections. We could create a model for sustainable urban development that actually serves everyone, not just the wealthy. "And Fletcher?" her father asked quietly. "Where does he fit into this?" She met his eyes. "I love him, Dad. I know you don't want to hear that. I know it complicates everything. But he's not his grandfather any more than I'm mine. We're just 2 people trying to build something good in a world that's too full of hatred already." Silence stretched through the room. Then her mother spoke again. "I like him." Everyone turned to stare at Patricia. She shrugged. "What? I've met him. After Marcus came to see Juliette, I did some investigating of my own. I invited Fletcher to lunch." "You what?" Harold looked betrayed. "I met with the young man. He's intelligent, kind, clearly devoted to our daughter. He's also committed to ethical development and has spent the last 3 years working with nonprofit housing organizations." Patricia smiled at Juliette. "He reminds me of someone, actually. You at that age, Harold." Before all this bitterness took root, Harold stood and walked to the window, staring out at the manicured gardens. Juliette held her breath, waiting. Finally, he turned back. "I need time to think about this, but I'm not saying no." It was more than she'd hoped for. Over the next few days, Juliette worked with Thomas and Patrick to put together a formal proposal for the joint development. Harold stayed quiet, attending meetings but not committing one way or another. And every night, Juliette stared at the number Marcus had given her, wanting desperately to call Fletcher but afraid of what it might mean if she did. The decision was made for her when she arrived at the construction site one morning to find Fletcher standing by the entrance, looking exhausted and determined and absolutely perfect. "Before you tell me to leave," he said quickly, "I want you to know that I quit." "What?" "I resigned from Fitzgerald Industries, effective immediately. I can't work for a company that's hurting you, even indirectly, and I can't be part of perpetuating this feud." He took a step closer. "I'm starting my own firm. Small scale, focused on community development. It might fail spectacularly, but at least it'll be mine. It'll be clean, Juliette's throat tightened. Fletcher, you didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, because you were right, we all have choices, and I choose you, Jules, I choose us. Even if you don't choose me back, I need you to know that you changed me. You made me want to be better. She closed the distance between them and kissed him, not caring who might see. I choose you too. I've been choosing you every day, even when I was trying not to. He pulled her close and she felt him trembling slightly. So where does this leave us? I don't know yet. My father hasn't agreed to the partnership, but I'm done letting fear make my decisions. She pulled back to look at him. Your father showed me the documents about what really happened. Fletcher nodded. He told me. I think he's been carrying guilt about not telling the truth for years. He thought protecting your family's dignity was more important than setting the record straight. Maybe he was right. Or maybe honesty is always better, even when it hurts. Juliette took his hand. Come on, there's someone you need to talk to. She drove them to her father's office downtown, calling ahead to make sure he'd be there. Harold looked up when they entered, his expression unreadable. Mr. Jensen. Fletcher extended his hand. I'm Fletcher Fitzgerald. I'm in love with your daughter, and I'm here to ask for a chance to prove I'm worthy of her. For a long moment, Harold just stared at him. Then, slowly, he shook Fletcher's hand. You've got some nerve showing up here. Yes, sir. But Juliette taught me that sometimes you have to be brave enough to fight for what matters. Despite himself, Harold almost looked like he might smile. She's something, isn't she? Got her mother's courage and her grandfather's stubbornness. And your vision, Fletcher added. The plans she's developed for the downtown property are brilliant. With the right support, she could change the entire landscape of urban development in Chicago. Don't try to flatter me, boy. I'm not. I'm being honest. Your daughter is the most remarkable person I've ever met, and I think you know it. Fletcher glanced at Juliette, then back at Harold. I'm not asking you to forget the past. I'm asking you to consider that maybe we can build a different future. One where our families work together instead of against each other. Harold sat back in his chair, studying them both. You quit your family business. I did. That was foolish. You had a good position there. It was necessary. I can't ask Juliette to choose between me and her family if I'm not willing to make sacrifices too. Finally, Harold did smile just a little. You're either very brave or very stupid. I haven't decided which yet. He pulled out a file folder. I've been reviewing the partnership proposal. It's solid work. Thomas and Patrick seem convinced it's viable. Juliette's heart hammered. And what do you think? I think I'm tired of fighting. I think maybe it's time to try building something instead of protecting against threats that might not even exist anymore. Harold looked at Fletcher. But understand this. If you hurt my daughter, there won't be any truce to protect you. Are we clear? Crystal clear, sir. And I have no intention of hurting her. Ever. Good. Harold stood and extended his hand again. Then let's talk about this partnership. The next few months were a whirlwind of negotiations, planning sessions, and late nights turning vision into reality. The Jensen-Fitzgerald development project became the talk of Chicago's real estate world. Two rival families joining forces to create something revolutionary. A mixed-use property that would house both luxury condos and affordable apartments, with ground-floor businesses committed to hiring from the local community. Fletcher launched his own firm, working on smaller community projects while consulting on the main development. Juliette found herself energized in a way she'd never been before, finally able to merge her passion for social good with her family's business expertise. And through it all, she and Fletcher grew closer. They had their challenges. There were still family members on both sides who disapproved, who thought the partnership was a mistake. There were business complications and zoning issues and 1,000 tiny crises that threatened to derail everything. But they faced it all together, 6 months after that first night at the gala, Fletcher took Juliette back to the diner where they'd eaten pie at midnight. The same booth, the same waitress, the same perfect apple pie. "I've been thinking," Fletcher said as they finished eating, "about choices and consequences, about what matters most." "Okay," Juliette said, her pulse quickening at the serious look in his eyes. "You were right that night when you said sometimes the right choice breaks your heart, but you were also wrong." He reached across the table to take her hand. "Because the right choice is the one that lets you be yourself while loving someone who sees you clearly. The right choice is the brave one, not the safe one." "Fletcher," he slid out of the booth and dropped to one knee, and Juliette's breath caught. The few other people in the diner turned to watch, smiling. "Juliette Jensen, you changed my entire life. You made me question everything I thought I knew about family and loyalty and what it means to be a good man. You challenged me to be braver, to fight for something that matters." He pulled out a small box, opening it to reveal a simple but beautiful diamond ring. "I know our families have complicated history. I know people will talk and judge and question us. But I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life choosing you, every single day. Will you marry me?" Through happy tears, Juliette nodded. "Yes. Yes. Absolutely yes." The diner erupted in applause as Fletcher slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her. It was perfect and real and everything she'd never known she wanted. Harold took the news better than expected, though he did pull Fletcher aside for what he called a serious conversation. Whatever was said, Fletcher emerged looking slightly pale but determined. Her mother cried happy tears and immediately started planning an engagement party. Thomas and Patrick were genuinely thrilled, having grown to respect Fletcher over the months of working together. The Fitzgerald side was equally supportive. Marcus pulled Juliette aside at the engagement party. "Thank you for giving my son a chance. And thank you for helping end this ridiculous feud. I'm sorry it took so long." "It ended when it was supposed to," Juliette said. "When two people were brave enough to see past the hatred." The wedding was planned for a year later, giving everyone time to prepare and for the development project to reach completion. Juliette and Fletcher wanted to celebrate their marriage in the building they'd created together, a symbol of what love and partnership could achieve. The property was finished 3 weeks before the wedding date. The grand opening was a major event, covered by every news outlet in Chicago. Harold Jensen and Marcus Fitzgerald stood side by side at the ribbon cutting, two old men finally letting go of ancient anger. "This is what my daughter envisioned," Harold told the crowd. "A place where everyone belongs, where luxury and accessibility coexist, where we build up instead of tear down." He looked at Juliette and Fletcher standing hand in hand. She learned that from her mother. The courage to love even when it seems impossible. The building was everything they'd hoped for and more. The design was stunning, modern without being cold. The affordable apartments were genuinely nice, not cheaply built afterthoughts. The commercial spaces were filling with local businesses. It was working. Their wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, late spring sunshine pouring through the windows of the penthouse where Juliette got ready with her mother and friends. "You look beautiful," Patricia said, adjusting the veil. "And more importantly, you look happy." "I am happy. Happier than I ever thought possible." Her mother hugged her carefully, mindful of the dress. "Your grandfather would have been proud, not of the business deal or the partnership, but of your courage, of your refusal to let old wounds destroy something precious." The ceremony was held in the building's central courtyard, transformed into a garden for the occasion. White flowers everywhere, rows of chairs filled with family and friends from both sides, the whole scene like something out of a dream. Thomas walked her down the aisle since Harold was officiating, a surprise that had made Juliette cry when he'd suggested it. Her father had gotten licensed just for this purpose, determined to be the one to unite these two families officially. Fletcher waited at the altar, and the look on his face when he saw her made Juliette's heart soar. Pure love, pure joy, no shadows or doubts. Just them, choosing each other in front of everyone who mattered. "We gather here today," Harold began, his voice steady and clear, "to celebrate a marriage that represents more than just two people making a commitment. This is about healing, about choosing love over fear, partnership over competition, future over past." He looked at his daughter, then at Fletcher. "I'll admit I didn't understand at first. I was too caught up in old stories, old pain. But these two young people showed me something I'd forgotten. That love isn't weakness. That trust isn't foolish. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is open your heart to someone you're supposed to see as an enemy." The ceremony was beautiful, personal vows that had everyone in tears. Fletcher promised to always support Juliette's dreams, to be her partner in every sense of the word. Juliette promised to challenge him, to stand beside him, to build a life full of purpose and passion. When Harold pronounced them married and Fletcher kissed his bride, the courtyard erupted in cheers. Marcus Fitzgerald embraced Harold Jensen, both men with tears in their eyes. Decades of hatred finally, completely over. The reception was a perfect blend of both families' traditions. The food, the music, the toasts that went on for hours. Patrick joked about his sister being crazy enough to marry a Fitzgerald. Thomas welcomed Fletcher to the family with genuine warmth. Marcus spoke about second chances and new beginnings, but the moment Juliette treasured most was when she and Fletcher had their first dance as husband and wife. The song was something soft and romantic, and as they moved together, the rest of the world faded away. "I love you, Mrs. Fitzgerald," Fletcher murmured against her hair. Juliette pulled back to look at him. "Actually, it's Mrs. Jensen Fitzgerald, hyphenated. We discussed this." He grinned. "I know, I just wanted to see your reaction." Then, more seriously, "Thank you for taking a chance on me, on us. Thank you for being worth it." She kissed him softly. "This is just the beginning, you know. We have so much more to build together. I'm counting on it." They danced until late, surrounded by love and laughter and the promise of a future neither of their families could have imagined a year ago. 2 years later, Juliette stood in the nursery of their new home, a renovated brownstone in a neighborhood they were helping revitalize, rocking their infant daughter Alina. Fletcher came in quietly, wrapping his arms around both of them. "She's perfect," he whispered. "She is." Juliette looked down at the tiny face, so peaceful in sleep. "Think she'll forgive us for the complicated family tree? I think she'll be proud of it. She'll grow up knowing that love is stronger than hatred, that families can heal. That everything her parents built together started because they were brave enough to see beyond what they were told to believe." The downtown development had spawned 3 more similar projects across Chicago, each one a collaboration between the Jensen and Fitzgerald companies, which had now formally merged into one entity. Fletcher's smaller firm worked alongside them, focusing on community initiatives and ensuring that growth benefited everyone, not just investors. Juliette had been recognized by several architectural and urban planning organizations for her innovative approach to sustainable development. She spoke at conferences, mentored young designers, and continued to push for projects that prioritized people over profit. And every night, she came home to Fletcher, to Alina, to a life that had seemed impossible but had become her reality. "You know what I was thinking," Fletcher said as they laid Alina in her crib. "We should take her to that diner, start a tradition, midnight pie on her birthday every year." Juliette laughed quietly. "She's 3 months old. I don't think she can eat pie yet." Fine, we'll wait until she's older, but the tradition stands. That place is where everything changed for us. They returned to the living room, settling onto the couch together. Through the window, Chicago sparkled, a city that had witnessed their journey from forbidden love to family legacy. "You ever regret it?" Juliette asked. "Giving up your position at your father's company? All the complications we've faced." Fletcher turned to look at her, his expression completely serious. "Not for 1 second. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Jules. You and Alina and this crazy blended family we've created. I'd make the same choice 1,000 times over." "Me too." She curled into him, perfectly content. "Me too." Years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and triumphs. They had 2 more children, twin boys who inherited both families' stubbornness and drive. Harold eventually retired, handing full control of the Jensen side to Thomas, but remaining active as an advisor. Marcus did the same, spending his retirement volunteering with the housing initiatives his son and daughter-in-law had championed. The development model Juliette and Fletcher pioneered spread beyond Chicago, influencing urban planning nationwide. They wrote a book together about ethical development, about putting community needs at the center of business decisions. It became required reading in architecture and business schools. But more than the professional success, more than the recognition and awards, they built a life of genuine happiness. Their home was always full of laughter, of cousins from both sides playing together, of family dinners where no one mentioned old feuds because the younger generation barely knew they'd existed. On their 10th anniversary, Fletcher took Juliette back to the ballroom where they'd first met. The hotel had agreed to let them have a private dinner there, just the 2 of them, in the exact spot where they'd stood and talked about optimism and peace. 10 years, Fletcher said, raising his glass. 10 years since you walked into my life and turned everything upside down. "Best decision I never planned to make," Juliette replied, clinking her glass against his. They'd aged, of course. There were lines around Fletcher's eyes now, silver threading through Juliette's dark hair. But they'd aged together, growing more rather than apart, learning each other's rhythms and needs and dreams. "Should we tell them tonight?" Fletcher asked. Juliette nodded. "Tonight's perfect." They decided to step back from the day-to-day operations of the company, handing leadership to the next generation. Thomas's daughter and Fletcher's younger brother had been working together for years, ready to take the reins. Juliette and Fletcher wanted time for other pursuits. They were starting a foundation focused on housing justice, traveling to consult on development projects worldwide, writing another book. But more than that, they wanted time. Time to be together without the constant pressure of business demands. Time to watch their children grow. Time to simply enjoy the life they'd fought so hard to build. "You remember what you said to me that first night?" Juliette asked. "About me being the only reasonable person in the room," Fletcher smiled. "I remember everything about that night, the way your eyes flashed when you defended peace. The sound of your laugh, the moment I knew I was in trouble. When was that? When you said life was too short for ancient grudges. I thought, this woman is going to ruin me or save me or both." "Both," Juliette confirmed. "Definitely both." They danced, just the 2 of them in the empty ballroom, to music only they could hear. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm, but in that moment, they existed in a bubble of perfect peace. Later, they drove to the diner, because some traditions were sacred. The same booth, though the waitress was new. They ordered pie and coffee, and Fletcher pulled out a folded piece of paper. "What's that?" Juliette asked. "Something I wrote the day after we met, before I knew your name was Jensen, before everything got complicated." He handed it to her. "I found it recently, cleaning out old files. The paper was worn, the ink slightly faded. In Fletcher's handwriting, met someone tonight who made me believe in possibility, in the idea that we can be better than our histories. If I never see her again, I'll always be grateful for the reminder that there's good in the world. If I do see her again, I'm going to marry her. Juliette's eyes filled with tears. You wrote this before you knew. I knew what mattered. I knew you were special. The rest was just details we had to work through. He took her hand. Best instinct I ever had. They finished their pie and drove home, to the brownstone full of sleeping children and photo-covered walls and all the beautiful mess of family life. In their bedroom, they got ready for bed in comfortable silence, years of partnership making words unnecessary. But as they settled under the covers, Fletcher pulled Juliette close. Hey, thank you. For what? For being brave enough to love me when it would have been easier to walk away. For standing up to your family and mine. For building this incredible life with me. He kissed her forehead. For being you. Juliette felt warmth spread through her chest, the same feeling she'd had that first night on the balcony, the feeling of coming home. You make it easy, you always have. She fell asleep in his arms, perfectly content, knowing that somewhere in Chicago, two families were resting easier because two people had chosen love over fear. Knowing that their children would grow up in a world with less hatred and more possibility. Knowing that every hard choice, every moment of doubt, every sacrifice had been worth it. Because sometimes the most forbidden love is the one that heals everything. Sometimes the person you're supposed to see as an enemy is actually your greatest ally, your perfect partner, the one who makes you whole. Sometimes the only way forward is to let go of the past and trust that building something new is worth the risk. Juliette had spent her whole life being told the Fitzgeralds were the enemy. And then she met Fletcher and discovered that love doesn't care about family feuds or business rivalries or ancient grudges. Love only asks if you're brave enough to reach for it, to fight for it, to believe that it's worth everything. She'd been brave. They both had. And they'd built a life more beautiful than either had imagined possible, proving that sometimes the best love stories are the ones that were never supposed to happen at all.